Okay, so over the next week, over the next 2 weeks before we start final projects, we're going to be building a news site React app. Everything that you see, this is going to be your final project. It's kind of like a Reddit clone, and I just want to show a few things that are fairly cool about this particular app. So it's, I mean, upon first glance, it's nothing special. It just looks like a giant CRUD app full of articles and things of that nature. But you'll notice just the sheer speed of which I'm able to switch between different sections and different articles. So like at the top of Reddit, they have opinion, world, national business, and a login. So I can just go super quick between each one, and you can kind of see the speed that those requests are being made. And the reason that's happening that quickly is I don't have a server. Like all of that is being stored inside of React. When I go back to the home page over here, well, this is an actual request, as you can see. I can actually click on each individual article, and it goes by pretty quickly. I also have this this search bar over here that the moment I start typing in Fallujah, F-A-L-L, it starts narrowing down based off of the number of times that I type something, and it's just a nice thing to use. I can go all the way back out, and it's a bug that we should probably fix a little bit later. But it's like if I want to type in Mosul, I can go back a little bit too, and then it'll give me everything that has the letter M inside of the title. So this is going to be our end result. We have the ability to log in and log out afterwards, and you can create, read, update, and destroy specific articles. With that though, that's not going to be built in one day. We're going to start with news site 1 and kind of build up as we go. Let me destroy this, close this one out. For the sake of time, I already cloned down news site number 1, and then I've also npm installed, which is the same thing as bundle install. I'm asking Node Package Manager, hey, go out and install everything that I'm going to need. Open it up here in VS Code, change the color for everybody. Right, now I'm just going to run npm start, and we'll take a look at what we've got to get started. As that's loading up, let's look at what we're going to do here with news site. The challenge number 1 is fairly simple. It's basically, I have one giant app.js that handles a lot of stuff, and then I have 3 individual components that I'm going to be passing down props from one area, from one particular component into another component. How do I pass it down, and how do I call it? Those are the big things that we're going to be focusing on today. So right now, we just have 3 components, an app nav, an article teaser, and an article component. And when you start looking at websites, try to think of things in terms of components. So if I just go to like gram.com /DHH Instagram, so that you can see what happens if you invent a very popular web framework. Let's look at this page for a second and think through what are some possible components that show up on the page. And components, again, are just reusable bits of React code. Think through, like, let's just look at this page and think through what could be some components. To get you started, I think this is probably one React component, this small little box up here. Probably it's called the header component. The header component has things about that it knows, like state. So if you're logged in, it won't say this login. Like it'll say like welcome, like hello, whatever your username is. But right now the state is that I'm logged out at the moment. When you look here, what are some other things in terms of state that you might be able, components that you see on the page?
If somebody's following
they're
following you.
Yes, that's state. Let's just talk about different components. So this was like the header component, like just like the very top of the page.
Picture component.
It looks like there's like a lot of different individual picture components. Like each one of these, this is like a 3 by whatever grid over here, and each one of these is an individual picture component. There's probably a profile like component right over here where it's like at this particular point, insert the face, put in all the numbers over here, and put in the and take the props of like basically grab a bunch of stuff from the database and shove it in here. That's basically what they're doing here. I cannot believe this is actually this guy's life, but I mean, he is a genius, does have a very, very successful consulting business here, and wrote Ruby on Rails. So I'm guessing he's doing quite well.
He's the author.
He is the author of Ruby on Rails. Yeah, he's still here in Chicago as well.
He does race cars.
He does race a lot of cars. Yeah. So as we're thinking through different components on the page, we've got components over here. Right now, it looks like nothing. We have app nav, article teaser, and article. So we have the navigation up top, the teaser, and then the individual article component. Let's read through this. So it says component number 1 is going to be article teaser, this one right in the middle. It accepts a few props or properties. It takes an ID, takes in a title, created date, and a handle title click. And all of those props are always going to be passed in. So I've cloned everything down. I've run npm install, which is the same thing as bundle install. Where do I get started? Like, which folders do I start with?
Source.
Under source, specifically app.js, there's everything that you're seeing here. And there's quite a bit of code that's happening on this page. So let's just go from top all the way down to the bottom so we know exactly what's going on. Line 1, import React, specifically the component library from the React node module, which is found somewhere inside of here. 2, it says import news. So I'm somewhere inside of here, I'm going to be using the capital N news variable, and that's from news.json. I don't know where that is. Data news.json. It looks like this is just one giant JavaScript array full of article objects. There's an abstract, there's a byline, created date. It's just data. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of stuff. I'm importing the CSS, and then I'm importing 3 separate components: app nav, article teaser, and article. Remember when we talked about Instagram? We said there were different components on the page that are going to be rendered at different times. So there was a header component, there's probably a profile component, and like Ed said, these are all individual photo components, more or less. We have our app nav, our article teaser, and our article for us. So I'm importing these 3 particular components. I've got this one giant class. So I have a constructor, which is kind of like the initialize of Ruby on Rails. It takes in some properties. I'm going to super those props up, which means I'm just going to, like, whatever I'm passed in from component, I have access to that as well. I just create a random article index, which is just math.floor times math.random times news length. It's basically saying how many articles are inside of news. I'm just getting a random number between 1 and whatever the limit is. And then I got a random article object from there. So I've done a few calculations ahead of time, and then I have state. So state, remember, what is state? Let's get that answered first.
It is the given value at any given time.
Given value at any given time. I kind of see where you're going with it. Anyone else? It's not false.
It's like an instance, sort of.
It's more or less like an instance. Yeah, you can think of it as it's just a hash. It's just a hash that this particular component, this particular app component, has access to. So you can put whatever you want inside of there. For us, we put a bunch of stuff under nav items. And then we have the exact article. So this article is an object. It has an ID, title, abstract, byline, image, created date. And the value of it is all of these things. So it's just a hash that I have access to everywhere. It's an instance variable that has access to everything. So I've got a constructor, and I've got a render. The return is what shows up on the page. And you can kind of see I have app nav component. That's what shows up at the very top. Horizontal rule, which is that line right underneath it. And then as of right now, I just have an app nav component in there and it doesn't do anything because we haven't written the code there yet. Then we have article teaser component, a horizontal line, article teaser component over here, and then an article component with a bunch of stuff on there. So we're going to start with article teaser, and it says that it takes in a ID, title, created date, and handle title click all the time. And there's a bug in the code somewhere. So first things first, the article teaser component should display the title And when you click it, it should fire off this.props.handle title click, and then this.props.id. And then I want to also have the created date as well. So you can kind of see I have an article teaser right here. I'm passing down properties, specifically ID, title, created date, and handle title click from app.js into this individual article teaser. So where can I find this article teaser component so that I can modify it? Components, article teaser.js. Every single individual component outside of app.js goes inside of a components folder, and then a folder with the name of the component on it. Inside of there, you'll have one particular, like the actual file itself, and the corresponding spec file that's associated with it. It's kind of annoying because not everything is under spec anymore, but they just said like this is easier because those two things are just put together. You can quickly see if I don't have this file right here, I can see that I have article teaser that's not tested. So we'll split the screen real quick. It says that article teaser, I'm passing down ID, title, created date, and handle title click. And specifically, they said that article teaser should display the title inside of an A tag. Okay, so I'm just going to make an A tag real quick. Display the title inside of an A tag. How do I access the props that were passed down from app.js into article teaser?
You just want to do this dot props and then the name of the prop.
This dot props dot and then the name of the prop. In our case, we're talking about title. So this dot props dot title. And again, just to recap, app.js is the main entry. From app.js, I'm calling an instance of article teaser component. I'm passing down these 4 props. And then once I'm inside that individual component, I'm calling this.props.title to access it. It's the same thing as if I were just doing this in Rails, it'd be a, and it'd be like at title, like that. It's just two different ways of accessing it, but it does the same thing. So let's just see if something shows up on the page, and you can kind of see if I got this random article's title showing up on the page. I can keep refreshing, and it's getting a new one every single time. So I like it. Now, an href has to actually go somewhere. It says, display the title, no problem. When the title is clicked, it should call this.props. This whole thing. And will arrow functions be useful here? So whenever I click on this, I want it to fire off. It looks like there is a handle title click being passed from app.js into article teaser. And it looks like I'm just going to console log the article ID. So when I click it, it's going to just console log the particular article's ID out to the page. How do I do it? To get you started, I'm just going to have an href that goes nowhere. And I'll leave it to you. How do I, like when I click on this, something's going to happen. So I'm obviously using an event handler. Which one is that going to be? It's going to be on click. So whenever this is clicked, a bunch of stuff is going to happen.
Parentheses.
Parentheses.
Fat arrow.
Fat arrow.
And what we want to happen.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I think it's right here. So just grab this. Now tell me, why did you decide to use a fat arrow function?
Well, on research, I found out that well, one, we can do the fat arrow function, so that way we don't have to bind this to it.
Yep.
And
yeah. So whenever you use it, you have two options right here. One is either I'm going to do a dot bind every single time, and that's okay. But I want people to get more into the habit of let's just use fat arrow functions all the time. So whenever you call any sort of function, just make it a fat arrow function. If this works, I'll be very surprised, but we'll find out. So I'm going to open up my Chrome Dev Tools, and I have a entire a clickable link with the title on it. If I click this, it'll console log a number out here on the right. I'm clicking it over and over, and it's console logging that number over and over. So what's happening is app.js is your main entry point. It renders out an article teaser component. This article teaser component has a render, which is what shows up on the screen. I have an href that whenever I click it, it fires off the handle title click that was passed down from the parent. So this dot props, and again, that's all the things that are being passed in from here to here. So these 4 things. Handle title click gets fired off, and then all it's doing is console logging article ID. That one's fairly simple. And then we want to have the created date in a p tag. So pretty simple. I'm going to have a p tag, and I'm going to leave it for somebody else to tell me what to do. I want to call the created date.
This props created.
This.props.created date. And I believe that's correct because I got this created data right over here. I go out, refresh the page, and nothing shows up. I don't know what's wrong with it, but let's figure it out. So I'm calling this.props.created date, and you can kind of see this article teaser has a property being passed down called created date. The value of that is this.state.article.created date. So I know this is 100% correct because there's a prop being passed down called created date. So let's go up to this.state, go up to article, and then look at the created date there. So this.state.article has a created date right there. Does anyone see if there's a typo anywhere? Hint, there is.
It's an underscore, and there's snake case and camel case.
Yep. Yeah, one is a snake case and one's camel case. The way that I'm debugging this is I'm looking here, nothing is showing up. This.props.created date is not showing up. But you can kind of see there is a created date article prop that's being passed down from app into article teaser. So I'm kind of like, okay, so I got to go up one more level. This.state.article has created date, but this one is underscore. I think all I've got to do is just change this. Refresh. And underneath it, it has the timestamp that it was actually created. So we just finished one particular component. We'll move on to the next one. Article accepts the following props. These 5 things. The title, abstract, and created date. So title, abstract, and these first 3 things are always going to be there. Sometimes image and byline are going to be there, but they also might not be there. So fairly simple. Display the title, created date, and the byline and image if it exists, and also the abstract. So we'll just start with number 1 and number 2. This is going to be pretty simple. Where do I look to get my components? Oh, it's already there. Let's take a look at article. So article, and then the props that are being passed down is what on earth is these 3 dots?
Spread.
What's a spread operator?
Just everything in state. This.state.article. All the properties, I guess you call them, are added to the array.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the 3 dots in the front here is shorthand for just going ID, this.state.article.id, title, this.state.article.title. You could type all of these things just like we did over here, or you can do the spread operator because I know that I'm going to need all of these things later down the road. So the spread operator basically is like, imagine you're taking a knife, putting it inside of a jar of peanut butter, you got some toast, and just spreading it all over. So I'm taking the contents from one place and spreading it all over contents of another one. Or like yesterday night, there was a giant spider in my apartment. I don't know how to kill the spiders when they're on the wall like this. So I just went like, pa, smacked it. And then I tried to take it off with a paper towel, and then I just smeared the guts all over the wall. So the spread operator, I take one thing from one place and I spread it all over the other place. This is just shorthand for article, and then you just do like ID equals this.state.article.id. Basically, it's this. This is shorthand for all of this. All right, so first things first, it says display the title inside of an H1 tag. Very simple. H1. I think it's this.props.title, if I'm not mistaken. H1. Take a look over here. It'll automatically refresh for me. Today in Mosul, retaken parts of ISIS, blah, blah, blah. All right, so that's the first one. The second one says display the created date in a p tag. So James, tell me what to type here. So it's created date. It's going to be inside of a p tag.
Created. Oh, the created date.
Mm-hmm.
So put your p tag.
Put my p tag.
And then curly brace.
Curly brace.
This dot props dot. Is it just created underscore date?
Yep. And then
close the p tag.
Close the p tag. See if this works. All right, so Mexican government rejects whatever. Here is the created date underneath. So Ed, tell me, I'll be nice. Ed, give me number 5. Display the abstract inside of a p tag. How do I call the abstract?
Quite sure, because I don't see.
So I have, so app.js is the main thing that's loaded first, right? And then I'm creating an individual article component. I'm passing down a whole bunch of stuff right over here. So I'm passing down all of this ID, title, abstract, byline, image, random article, and created date. So I'm passing down all of these things from one class into another class. Now that I have access to it here, I just want to call it inside of a p tag. So, go ahead.
P tag.
Yep.
This dot props.
Dot. I want to.
There's an abstract.
Yep. So I'm just going to copy this line. And so it's this.props.abstract. So again, like Ed said, if we want to create an abstract, it's just going to be a p tag. This.props.abstract. Inside the curly braces, that's JSX for embedded JavaScript. I'm just going to interpolate that here and close it off. And then, if all goes well, I'll see a little section down over here. Yep. There's another abstract underneath. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky. It says sometimes image and byline are there. Sometimes they're not. So I know I have to do some sort of conditional logic. Like if I see this.props.image or this.props.byline, I want to display that. Otherwise, I'm not displaying it whatsoever. How do I do that?
So, guessing that you would do, I guess you could do a function.
You can call a function, sure.
Yeah.
You want to create it? You can create another function.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll call it display image.
Yeah.
We'll just start with that, and then if it works, we'll just copy and paste it down over here. All right. So what am I doing with display image?
Looking to see if this.props.image is there.
Okay. So if this returns me something, this will evaluate to true. What am I going to do?
We want to do a p tag, or no, our image tag, I'm sorry.
Okay.
With the source equaling to this.props.image.
Okay. Anything else?
And then we want to take that display image and we want to invoke it underneath wherever it's supposed to.
Sure. So we'll just call this dot display image. Kind of like that.
Yes.
So because you can't do conditional logic underneath the return. It's just not allowed. That's all going to be just, it's all stuff that shows up on the outside. It's all HTML, it's all interpolation, things of that nature. So what Michael decided to do is, I need to see if there's anything inside of this.props.image. So let me throw it inside of a display image function. And if there's anything there, I will push this out to the screen. I think you need a return. Let's see if this works. And there it is. So we have that image. John, did you have something?
I I just you're already doing it this way, so I don't want to like change streams now. But I just put 2 variables in render. Like I just put the conditional statements in render with 2 predefined variables.
Yep.
And then if the conditional statement is true, it just sets the variable to whatever the HTML code is, and then I just threw them down there into the return instead of functions.
That is the way that I generally do it as well. But since we decided to start this way, we'll continue down the path, and I'll show you exactly what John's talking about. So with that logic of display image looking like this, how do I do something with the display byline?
Copy all that code.
Just copy all this code. All right, so it's not going to be display image anymore. It's just going to be display byline. So if somebody passes in a byline for me, like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, I'm going to create a h2 tag with the byline inside of it. So fairly simple, h2, close it off. This.props.byline, and then a closing h2. Is that right? No, that's bad. And then all I'm going to do is just, instead of this.displayImage, I'm going to do this.displayByline. If all goes well, this will refresh, and I'll see, there it is, that H2 of by Anne Bernard, Russian airstrike, kills 3 Turkish soldiers. So this is one way of doing it, is I create specific functions, and when I fire them off, if this evaluates the true, I'm going to return an HTML element. So when I call this.displayImage, if it's there, I'm going to return this particular thing out to the page. So it's actually interpolating an entire HTML element out to your return over here. What John was talking about looks a little something like this. Let me change it to JavaScript. What John was talking about looks a little something like this. So at this point, I don't have 3 separate functions. I have 1 giant function. And I'm just going to copy and paste it from over here. So you can do as much as you want outside of the return, but once you hit return, it has to just be either interpolation or HTML elements. So I'm doing the exact same amount of code inside of this left side John solution as I am on the right side with Michael's solution. What I'm doing is I'm setting byline and image equal to just empty strings, just nothing at the very beginning. If this.props.byline exists, I'm going to actually overwrite it and set it to h2, and then the same thing over here, this h2. If there's an image, I'm going to change image to this particular thing here. You can also just do let image and let byline. You don't have to set it equal to anything. It's just saying like, just declare these 2 variables, set it to nothing right away. If it's there, then I'll shove it in. And then if the image is there, I'll shove it in the image. And then over here, it's not this.displayImage. It's just byline and image. Both of these will work. Just to verify, let us copy and paste this. I really hate this auto formatting thing. Yep, and you can still see both of them still work. It's 2 ways of doing the exact same thing. So just keep them side by side for you to take a look at. One of them will probably be better off for you than the other one. Generally speaking, I do it this way because I'm really lazy, but this is probably a better way of doing it because you have separate methods to actually determine whether or not something is going to happen. So we're 2/3 done. Now we have app nav. This is probably the most difficult one. I want to create a nav bar at the very top that will allow me to put up like home and opinion and everything that you find over here. the home, opinion, world, national, politics. I want all of those words to show up at the very top. And then when I select it, I just want that particular value to console log. So I have app nav. I'm going to open it up. So I have app nav over here, and it accepts two props, nav items and handle nav click. It should return a nav component with a bunch of A's as children, one for every single item in the this.props.nav items. It should map through, looks a little something like this. Basically, whenever I click on it, it should fire off this.props.handle nav click and pass in the value property from the nav item object. So read through this real quick, and then we'll get started with the actual code. So again, I start with app, and I've got an individual app nav component. I'm passing in two props, nav items and handle title click. Whenever I click on, I want to create, based off of this giant array of stuff, I want to create individual links, and then whenever I click on one, it fires off the, there is something somewhere. It's going to console log the clicked item. Right, so I have no idea how to do this. All I know is there's going to be something like this inside of the A's. So I'm going to just grab this for now and just paste it in here. I know that whenever I click it, it's going to be handle nav click. This.props.handle nav click, and what's going to show up is going to be the thing that you clicked on, which I don't know how to get. Thoughts?
Interesting.
Well, we can do the map function. We can set a constant equal to
Where?
above render.
Okay, we can do it above render. That's
Not
fine.
above render, but I'm sorry.
Above return? Okay.
Is it going to be? Do we want to construct this, or is this going to be something that changes? Like, is the number of nav items going to be changing, or is it going to be constant?
We want to be able to handle all of them. In the case that the business person decides, hey, I want to add more things onto my, like more topics onto the top of the nav bar.
So is that constructor led?
It's up to you.
Well, if they're going to be adding stuff, we should probably use led.
I think either of them work in this particular case. I think you can do const because once you, so this might change. They might add or remove things, but once you create it, you're not doing anything to it inside of the app nav. So you can do either one. I generally go with const until ESLint tells me not to use const. So const, and you just called this, what did you want to call this?
Labels.
Okay, so const labels equals
Equal to this dot, yeah.
So you said I have to map over it. Okay.
Dot map.
Mhm.
Parentheses.
Yep.
Yeah. Then we want to do another set of parentheses,
Another set of parentheses.
and then that's going to be, we just call it label,
Label.
and that arrow.
Like that.
Yes. And then a tag. Yep. Well,
You're gonna need a return.
right. Yep.
What is inside this A tag?
Um,
I think it's just all this stuff, right?
yeah.
So href will send it nowhere for now. You're saying that when I click it, what's going to happen?
One click, then yeah.
Mhm.
Quotes, or not quotes, but parentheses.
Parentheses,
Another fat arrow.
fair arrow.
And then that's going to be on click. We wanted to run that function. So this dot, whatever it's called. I'm not sure what it's called.
This .props.handle nav click.
There we go.
And I need to pass in something. What do I need to pass in?
I need to pass in what you clicked. So it's going to be label dot label.
Label dot label. We're gonna say value because what I want to show up on the screen is going to be label dot label. Okay. And then if all goes well, I can just call it right over here. Labels. Let's just see if this works, and then we'll explain it because there's a lot of stuff that just happened. All right, so I have an app nav component with everything that shows up. At least it shows up, so I'm fairly pleased about that. And if all goes well, I can click on each individual one, like home or something like that. And the word home will show up. Let's click on national a whole bunch of times. New York. Wait, did I click on New York? There's New York region. And business a whole bunch of times. So it does work. Let's refresh the page because I saw a few errors. So we've refreshed the page. And there's a big red error over here. It says, it's actually a warning. It just says that if you're iterating over an array of things, you want to keep track of each individual index. It's just in case you ever need to do stuff with it at a later point. So all I've got to do is add a label and then index, and then add one more thing that says key equals index, just so that like React is happy, because now you have access, you know exactly which iteration that you're on in case you need to troubleshoot. And then since I've changed that, it's automatically going to refresh for me, and you can see that that red warning does go away. So let's break down this very large bit of code that Michael gave us. So again, everything under the return is either going to be HTML or embedded JavaScript. Like you cannot do a bunch of conditional statements. So at the very top, you created a constant variable called labels. And the idea was I'm getting passed in this giant thing here on the left. I need to iterate over each one of them so that I can display the word on the page, and when I click it, it's going to console log this particular thing. So I'm going to map over this .prop.nav items, which is this giant array here, and I'm going to iterate. So each individual object, so this thing right here, and then this thing right here, and then this thing right here, I'm going to save as the variable label. I might call this not label, but probably nav item, because there's a lot of labels. So each individual nav item, because this is a list of nav items. So I have each individual nav item, meaning this, second iteration, third iteration, and the index. So I'm going to return a bunch of links out to the page. It goes nowhere. I keep track of how many, which index I'm on. And then whenever anybody clicks on this, there's a fat arrow function that fires off this .props.handle nav click. Where's handle nav click? App nav, right here. Handle nav click, so it's being passed down from app down to app nav. So this .props.handle nav click right here. And it expects a return value. So the clicked item, and the value of that is going to be nav item.value. And the thing that shows up is nav item.label. So the uppercase one shows up on the screen. The lowercase one is the one that shows up in the console log. And then once I created it above the return, I can call it down here just by interpolating. You can do the same thing outside of the render if you'd like, create a separate function and do that. Both of them are acceptable. And that's how we do news site number 1. Again, news site number 1 is mostly about I have a master app class at this moment, and I'm just passing stuff from app.js into all of these 3 individual components. Main thing is, this is how I pass down props from one particular component to another. This is one way, this is another one. And then this is how I access those props, just by doing this .props. Whatever the property name is. Questions?